Miss Eliza stood in front of her house one last time. She looked at the door where Nena used to greet her with a smile, and the garden where her children used to play together. Tears filled her eyes as she said goodbye to the home that was filled with so much love. With her bags on her back, she began her journey. She had no idea how long the journey to the new village would take. She passed through the forest and slept under the open sky with the trees and sand to keep her company, and she ate the little food she had brought with her. She walked for days, her feet growing sore and her body weary, but she did not stop. Each step took her further away from the pain of her past. Mrs. Eliza pressed on, driven by the need to escape to a place where she could finally lay her grief to rest. As she journeyed on, she met other travelers and traders on their way to market. She met farmers moving their cattle and a group of children who offered her some fresh fruits. As she worked, memories of her family haunted her. She saw her children smile in the faces of the children she passed on the road. At night, when she lay down to sleep beneath the stars, she would close her eyes and see her husband's face, his eyes filled with love as he looked at her. These memories were both a comfort and a torment, reminding her of what she had lost. After several days, she arrived at the village of Zumba. The village of Zumba is a place where the sun seemed to shine a little brighter and where the laughter of children filled the air. Though it's a small town, but Miss Eliza has heard of a peaceful tranquility of the village while growing up, and the only thing on her mind is to settle in that village. She needs to find her peace to live again. As Miss Eliza entered the village, she felt a sense of relief. This was a place where no one knew her, where she could be just another old woman and not the grieving widow who lost everything. She arrived at Zumba with nothing but a small bundle of belongings, a tattered wrapper around her frail body, and a face that seemed permanently marked by sorrow. The people of Zumba were a close-knit community. They knew each other's names, their children, and their grandparents. In Zumba, strangers were welcomed with open arms if they came with a smile. Miss Eliza, however, did not. Her face was one of sadness, her eyes downcast, and her mouth curved in a frown that never seemed to ease. She did not speak much, only giving her name and saying she was from a village far away. The villagers began to whisper among themselves, asking who was this woman and why she came to their village. Some believed she was cursed, that her sadness was a dark cloud that would bring misfortune to their village. Others thought she was merely strange, someone who could not find joy even in the simplest of things. Eliza was offered a small and old hut at the edge of the village to live. She swept the floor, patched the holes in the roof, and planted a small garden in front. But even as she made this place her home, she rarely ventured into the heart of the villagers. When she did, she was met with cold greeting and whispers. No one wanted to speak with her, and no one wanted to be near her. She was an outcast, not because of anything she has done, but because of the sadness she could not hide. Yet, there was one person who saw beyond Miss Eliza's sorrowful nature. Her name was Ada, a woman in her early 30s with a kind heart and a curious mind. Ada was known in Zumba for her ability to listen to people's stories. She believed that everyone had a story to tell, and that sometimes those stories needed to be heard in order to heal. One afternoon, Ada decided to visit Mrs. Eliza. The villagers warned her against it, saying that nothing good would come from talking to the old woman. But Ada was determined. She gathered a basket of fresh fruits from her garden as a gift for her and set out to visit her in her hut. When Ada arrived, she found Eliza sitting on a small wooden stool outside her hut, staring blankly at the sky. Her eyes were distant, lost in thoughts that Ada could only imagine. Good afternoon, Ma. Ada greeted, her voice soft and warm. Miss Eliza looked up, surprised to see someone standing before her. It had been weeks since anyone had spoken to her directly. She nodded slightly, her expression unreadable. I brought you some fruits, Ma, Ada said, holding out the basket. Miss Eliza hesitated before reaching out to take the basket and thanked her. Ada smiled, though Miss Eliza did not return it. Instead, she looked down at the basket as if unsure what to do next. Ada asked whether she would like to sit with her, and she nodded. Ada sat down on the ground, smoothing her skate beneath her. I have noticed that you have been keeping to yourself, Ada said gently. I understand if you want to be alone, but I will also want you to know that if you need someone to talk to, I am here in this village for you. Miss Eliza did not respond immediately. She kept her gaze on the ground. Ada waited patiently, sensing that Miss Eliza was struggling with something deep inside her. Finally, after what felt like eternity, Miss Eliza spoke. Why do you want to talk to me? She asked, her voice filled with bitterness. No one else in this village does. They all look at me as if I am cursed. Ada shook her head. I don't believe you're cursed. I believe you're carrying a great burden, one that you have been holding onto for a very long time. Sometimes, sharing that burden can make it lighter. You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to, Ada added quickly. But if you do, I am here to listen. For a long while, Miss Eliza did not say anything. She stared at the ground, her mind far away. Ada wondered if she had said too much, if she had overstepped a boundary that should have been left alone. But just as she was about to leave, Miss Eliza spoke again. I wasn't always like this, she began, her voice so quiet that she had to lean in to hear her. I wasn't always this sad. There was a time when I was happy, when I had a family, a home. But that was a very long time in a different village, a village that does not exist. Ada listened intently, not wanting to interrupt. She could tell that Miss Eliza was ready to share her bitter story, a story that has been buried deep within her for years. I was married in a village called Echa. It was a small village, much like this one, surrounded by forests and rivers. Miss Eliza paused, her eyes distant as she recalled her past. We were happy, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. We did not have much, but we had each other, and that was enough for us. But then everything changed, Miss Eliza said, her voice growing heavy with pain. I had two children, a boy and a girl. Obi was my first child, while Nena was the baby of the house. One day they decided to go to the stream, just like they had done many times before. It was a hot day and they wanted to cool off. I warned them to be careful, but they were young, full of energy and confidence. They promised me they would be back before sunset. She paused, her eyes welling up with tears. Ada squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. At nightfall, when they didn't return, my husband and I went looking for them. We searched everywhere, calling their names, but there was no answer. Finally, we found them lying at the riverbank, side by side. They were gone, just like that. No sign of a struggle, no explanation, just like that. Miss Eliza wept so bitterly. Ada was silent, her heart heavy with sorrow for her friend. The villagers were shocked just like we were, but instead of supporting us, Miss Eliza continued. They turned against me. They whispered that it was my fault, that I had somehow brought curse upon my family. My husband couldn't bear the death of our children. It was as if the pain was more on him. The grief was too much for him. A year after the death of our children, my husband was found dead in the field where he went to work. All my hope was lost. I wished for death to take me too, but it didn't happen. The village became unbearable for me. The land had swallowed the beauty of my life, my children, and now my husband. It was painful for me staying in the village that brought me sorrow, but I stayed back, hoping that one day what took my family would come for me. But I was wrong. It has been over 6 years I lost my family. Mrs. Eliza paused, tears streaming down her face. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, her voice breaking. The land we worked so hard for had turned against us, and I was left alone to face the shame. It was too much for me. Ada was in tears and hugged Mrs. Eliza. You are a strong woman, Mama, she whispered to her ears. You have been through so much, yet you are still standing strong. No one has the right to judge you. You are just the victim here. Ada's eyes filled with tears as she squeezed Mrs. Eliza's arm, her voice thick with emotion. Oh, Mrs. Eliza, I'm so sorry. You have been through so much. I'll be here for you as a friend, as a sister, and even as a daughter. We'll get through this together. Miss Eliza leaned into Ada's embrace, her body shaking with sobs. For the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt a small spark of hope. One day, something happened that changed everything. A young boy named Oba, who was an orphan in the village, a quiet child who often played alone near the edge of the village. One afternoon, while he was playing in the tall grass, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his leg. When he looked down, he saw a snake slithering away and he realized he has been bitten. Oba screamed in fear and pain, and the villagers quickly gathered around him. They saw the bite on his leg and knew it was serious. The poison from the snake bite could make him very sick or even take his life if they didn't act quickly. But no one knew what to do. Eliza, who was nearby, heard the commotion and ran over to see what was happening. When she saw Oba lying on the ground with a snake bite, she knew she had to help. In her old village, Miss Eliza learned how to treat snake bites, and her husband had once been bitten by a snake. Without hesitation, Miss Eliza knelt down beside Uba. She told the villagers, we must act quickly. The venom is dangerous. The villagers watched as Mrs. Eliza calmly placed her mouth over the bite and began to suck out the venom. She spat it out onto the ground and repeated this several times. She tore a piece of cloth from her dress and tied it tightly above the bite to stop the venom from spreading. Oba was crying bitterly, but Miss Eliza spoke to him gently. You will be fine, my son. She quickly went into the bush in search of a particular herb. She made a paste from the herbs and applied it to Oba's wound. The villagers were amazed by what they had seen. They had been scared and didn't know what to do. But Miss Eliza had saved Oba's life. They realized that Miss Eliza was not just a stranger. She was someone with great wisdom and a kind heart. The villagers were very grateful to Miss Eliza. They saw how much she cared for Oba, even though she had only known him for a short time. They began to understand that Miss Eliza was a good person who could bring something special to their village. From that day on, the people of Zumba welcomed Miss Eliza with open arms. They invited her to their homes, shared their meals with her, and asked her for advice on many things. Miss Eliza was no longer a stranger. She had become a part of their village family. Mrs. Eliza was happy to finally find a place where she can call home. She knew she couldn't replace her lost family, but she found comfort in the friendship and kindness of the villagers. This is the end of our story, the moral lesson. Please, my dear viewers, anybody you see in this life is fighting one battle or the other, and the least you owe them is the peace of mind and self-respect. Thank you. If you have come with me this far, please do well to subscribe to my channel for a more interesting story. Thank you so much. Bye.